Hello and welcome to the Global Dialogue. I'm Shereen Bhan and it is my pleasure to welcome back on the program Borge Brende, the President of the World Economic Forum. He joins us here, not in Davos, but in New Delhi. Borge, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us. Thanks very much for your time. Is 2025 looking worse, more unsettling and more uncertain than 2024?
So it is true that we are faced with a geopolitical recession. So the backdrop that we're seeing and moving into in 2025 is very complicated. There's also hope in 2025. We can maybe see an end of the Ukraine war. We can also maybe see that there is no further escalation in the Middle East. And even more importantly is that even with this uncertain geopolitical backdrop and landscape that we're operating in, it hasn't had that negative impact on the global economy. We still believe that there will be 3% growth next year. And of course, this is provided that not any of these conflicts escalate, so it gets out of control. There is competition, of course. You will see increased competition between the so-called G2 next year with China and US, especially after 20th of January, when President Trump will enter the presidency for the second time.
What could the implications be of a Trump presidency?
So it's not surprising that President Trump does intend to increase tariffs. That was also his policy in the first term. But what we saw in the first term is that he goes out with this, with, for example, 25% tariff on Mexico. But he says then to Mexico, if you're doing more to stop illegal immigration, and if you're doing more to stop also drugs and narcotics coming over the border, we might then renegotiate this. And I think this is what we will see more of, like deal-making related to the tariffs. We also know that the US economy is doing exceptionally well. It is almost growing 3%, and we're also seeing that they are benefiting very much so from the new technologies. The big companies
are all there.
Yeah, and we know from the platform economy that the winner takes it all. Will that be also the case for the Gen AI companies? And he is operating from a view of, from a situation where US is very strong. They're 27% of the global economy, with 5% of the global population.
But, you know, you talked about having some hope that there could potentially be a resolution as far as the Ukraine conflict is concerned. What are you pinning that hope on? Is it on the back of what you believe President Trump is going to be able to do in getting a deal going between Ukraine and Russia? What are you placing that hope on, of a de-escalation or perhaps even a resolution?
Every war has to end, though, sooner or later. It's 3 years, and there's 700,000 Russian soldiers that are killed or wounded. We know that the Russian economy is in a very dire situation. Almost 40% of their economy is now a war economy. They made some gains on the ground lately, but at a high cost. The plan was to take Ukraine in a week. That didn't work out, so it's taking time. So I do think that there might be a window for an understanding for peace next year. Let's see, but that would be very helpful. I also think that the Iran situation is probably easier to handle now, because Iran is also relatively weakened because of what has happened with Hezbollah and with Hamas. And also they lost a lot of their anti-air missiles, air defense during the latest attacks. That they had S-300s and there are less of them now. So maybe they also will be more in a negotiating mood, because they want to avoid, I think, further restrictions and sanctions from a Trump administration.
What's the outlook as far as Europe is concerned?
Europe is mixed. At the same time as you have quite a slowing of the German economy, and it is the largest economy, you have Spain having the fastest economic growth of any of the OECD countries now. And we're also seeing Greece is coming back, and some European countries are not doing that badly. For example, Poland. I think Germany is going through a structural change because they used to buy cheap Russian gas, export it expensive to China, and that is now changing. And you're also seeing that because of the electricity prices, there are industry moving out of Germany. But I think that Germany has a strong industrial base. And I don't think one should underestimate Germany's way of doing a comeback. Year 2000, they were also the sick man economically of Europe, and it took them 4 or 5 years with reforms, and they came back. Also in democracies, it does happen that there is political turmoil. Difficult now after Barnier got a no confidence vote, so President Macron will need to find a new prime minister and get the budget through. That situation is very complicated. It's almost like an impasse. I would say in Germany there are elections in February, and I think there will come, it will be possible to build a strong coalition after that election that can maybe introduce the necessary reforms.
What do you believe is the need of the hour today, specifically when we talk about Germany in the context of Germany making yet another attempt at a comeback?
So we got this report from Draghi a few months ago, and he is a report of 400 pages, where the former head of Italy, but also the European Central Bank, 400 pages where he comes up with all what is needed to increase European competitiveness. I think a lot of those proposals needs to be followed up. It is investment in R&D, it's infrastructure, but it's also getting rid of unnecessary red tape. A lot of suggestions on how Europe can do a comeback. And Europe has shown that in the past, though. For example, in 2012, everyone's speaking about, oh, Greece was bust. And now they're a very competitive economy. 2013, there was this discussion that the euro wasn't a reliable currency. Today, euro is the second most important currency in the world after the US dollars, and 20% of all trade goes through the euro. So one shouldn't underestimate Europe, but Europe has a big job to do. And of course, there are political forces on the right that is causing eruptions in the traditional system, and this is a lot based on immigration topics. As we saw in the American election, I would say there was two eyes. One was inflation, and the second was immigration. And in Europe now, I think immigration and also inflation, and people don't feel that they're better off than they were last year. Quite a country.
So given the confluence of some of these factors that you just spoke of, is there an urgency, a sense of urgency to get some of these reforms going and get that competitive edge back?
I think so, because one is also seeing more sluggish growth in Europe than, for example, in the US. And things take more time in the EU because there are so many nations that have to agree. But the strength of the EU is also still that it is 18% of the global economy. It's the largest market in the world. And if you look at life quality and also an age of talentism where you have to attract talents, I think Europe still has things going for it. But of course, the competition is fierce, and the US is doing very well. And we do see now that companies are moving from Europe to the US, where electricity prices is 1/3, and the economy is booming. But one thing in the US that is challenging is, of course, that wealth is not trickling down. And Trump has also now promised a lot of blue-collar workers that things will get better. But let's look at how complicated things are.
Yeah.
One are addressing now this illegal immigration. But if you look at the construction sector in the US, there's 7.5 million people that work in the construction sector. 1.5 million of these are illegal immigrants. So if they don't work in the construction sector anymore, what will happen with inflation? And what will happen with those projects? So it's a complex reality that is also facing the new Congress and the new president.
We're going to take a break here on the Global Dialogue and resume our conversation with the president of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende, right after this.